everyone. Welcome back to Unfiltered Perspectives. I'm Tara.
I'm Kimberly.
And I'm Leslie.
In today's episode, we're talking about a habit a lot of us have, but we don't always name it and we don't always admit it. What we're talking about is the masks that we wear. We all show up a little differently depending on where we are, whether that's at work, in relationships, at church, online. But why? Is it to feel safe, accepted, in control? When does adapting become hiding? What are we protecting? And what are we losing in the process? We'll talk about the roles we step into, the expectations we carry, and the fear that makes us hold back or show up as someone who isn't fully and genuinely who we are. Don't get me wrong. This isn't about shaming the masks. It's about understanding them, questioning their cost, and choosing when it's finally time to take them off. This is Unfiltered Perspectives, where real talk leads to real growth, and every perspective is valued.
Thank you, Tara, for that introduction into this week's topic. And as always, I'll ask you, are there specific questions that you have for us today?
The first one is, what are some masks that you've worn in different areas of your life?
Mm-hmm. Let me think about that for a minute while one of you ladies take over.
I feel like
Kimberly,
I'm gonna be the contrary person because I don't think that I do wear a mask. I mean, I will admit to code switching, but I don't think that I wear a mask. And I actually work pretty hard at being authentic.
Mm-hmm. I hear you. So when I was thinking about this topic, the idea of code switching actually popped into my head as well. So can you explain that a little bit as far as your distinguishing between wearing a mask and code switching?
Sure. Okay. So not a behaviorist. So I would define code switching as a way that we might behave one way in dominant mainstream culture and then another way in our home culture. So for example, there's slang that I will use with my friends and family that I wouldn't use at work. There's even just not just slang, but cadence, and there's a way that I am with family and friends that is a little looser than how I am in work or in sort of white culture.
but doesn't that mean that there are a lot of factors that play into that? It's your comfort level, it's your level of professionalism, and all of those things versus wearing a mask to me is, I guess, portraying something that you want people to see that may not actually be there.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I'm trying not to use the word fake, but that is in fact what it is when you're wearing a mask. You're covering up your true self, even if it is only in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the difference between what you're talking about and having on a mask.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So, Aunt Leslie, whether you're talking about wearing a mask which covers yourself or the idea of code switching or something similar where you're editing who you are or how you present yourself in various situations, does any of that apply to you? And if so, how? In what ways?
I think I think the code switching definitely applies to me, like Kim said, depending on your environment, whether it's work, whether it's family, whether it's friends, you just kind of adjust maybe
Mm-hmm.
to the company that you keep,
Mm-hmm.
so to speak. When it comes to masking, you may not be comfortable in your skin. You may not be comfortable in whatever it is you may be going through something in that particular moment. Even if you're trying to maybe mask whatever emotional battle you're having in a particular moment and you want to be joyful and you're struggling with showing that, you are having to put on a mask, putting on a front for that environment, for that moment, whether it be temporary or not. If you're someplace you don't want to be, that you have to show up for because you're obligated to some degree to an event, you're obligated to a person, you're obligated for work, you have to put on a mask. You genuinely don't want to be there, but you have to be there. In a sense, you have to put on a mask to show up. So there are a lot of situations where I feel like we put on a mask, whether we want to or not, and whether we want to admit it or not.
Mm-hmm. I agree with what you're both saying, although I don't necessarily know that I would call that fake. Sometimes I think I would call it wishful. like like in the situation where you talked about, let's say there's a place you don't want to be, let's say for work, and you put forth this different persona where you're not walking around angry and stomping your feet
Yeah,
because you you don't want to be there,
yeah.
but
But
you're
I
professional.
also said adjusting though.
No, no,
Yeah.
I yes, I know. You did. So yeah, that definitely does happen. There are situations where wearing a mask, say if online situation where there is a certain amount of anonymity, you can sort of have a personality or something that you don't necessarily have in your everyday life, your real life. Some people are naturally reticent or shy or however you want to phrase it, but when they get into this different kind of a community, they're able to be more outgoing. They're able to say and act in ways that they would not necessarily be able or comfortable doing
That's true.
and
Mhm.
if they weren't behind the screen. So I think in that sense, that's another way that we sometimes mask. I know that I do. I know that I do because I am a lot more comfortable when I am hidden, sort of. I guess hidden is the word I'm thinking of, but I'm not sure. I'm not exactly sure
Mhm.
because I can still be like on screen, but my thing is you don't really know me, so
Right,
I
right.
can I don't necessarily have to edit or filter myself in a way that I feel like I may sometimes have to do in
Mhm.
person.
In person, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Or in situations where you're around a lot of people who are religious or a little bit more uptight, maybe not religious, but a little bit more uptight
Mhm.
than I necessarily am or naturally am. But I adjust my behaviors, I adjust my words, I adjust
Right,
my interactions to kind of fit into that space
right, exactly.
in a way that is respectful of other people's inhibitions, maybe. I don't know. No, that respect other people's comfort level, I guess.
Okay. Mhm.
Because, like, personally, I do curse a lot. I've admitted this before. I do curse a lot, but when I get around certain people or in certain situations, I don't. Or I tend to be a little bit more careful about the things I say and how I say them.
Right.
Or
Mhm.
if I have a certain belief about a person or a situation or like political or social, what have you, I may not voice it or I just may stay silent or something so that I don't hurt somebody's feelings or something like
Mhm.
that. So the person or the people may not necessarily know my true feelings because I haven't voiced them. And the reason I may not
Right.
voice them is because I don't want to upset the balance. I don't want to hurt feelings. I don't want
Mhm.
to expose my own beliefs or my own what have you in a situation where I don't think that they would be well received. However,
Yes.
however, I am pretty sure I would never be in a situation where someone said something that was against my values that where I would keep silent.
Mhm. Okay, I get it.
Not sure that I'm following. So can you give an example of a time when you are doing this though? So you wouldn't sort of mask or keep quiet around your values, but you would to I don't know.
So let's say if we're in a situation where people, let's say they don't like a particular political candidate and they just voice like, I don't like this candidate, or they love this particular candidate, and I don't, I might not just say anything. But if they start espousing, speaking about some of these values that this person may have, or these things that people are doing, and I don't agree with them, and I feel like it's against the core of who I am, I will speak up. You know what I mean? So I wouldn't necessarily speak out against your like or dislike of a person, but if you're talking about their values or something and it goes against what I feel, I might say something. Or if someone if you're in a particular context where somebody is being homophobic and I don't like it, then I'm going to say
Right.
something.
Yeah,
I'm going to say
Mhm,
something.
mhm.
I understand that.
You mentioned the word adjust, so I'm going to use that in this question. Where did you learn to adjust yourself? If you can remember, was it at school, at home, church, or where?
Everywhere. I'm learning to adjust myself in different environments as I become more comfortable with myself
Hmm.
and what I thought were shortcomings or faults or flaws or whatever. I think as we become more comfortable with ourselves and who we are in life in general, you do you don't need to do as much adjusting. You show up as the person you are in every space.
Mhm. Yeah. Kimberly, what about you?
I mean, are you asking when? When did I learn to adjust or where? Or?
Oh, I asked where, but where, when, how the question hits you.
I mean, I think it's just a thing that, well, I do think it's a thing that happens naturally. Maybe it's not as natural for everybody else, but it's a matter of observing, right? Like sometimes the rules and expectations are explicit. You know, when you go to school, there are rules. When you go to work, there are codes of conduct. And sometimes you just sort of observe. I observe what people are doing, how people are dressing, how people are talking, things like that.
Hmm. Same.
But I do think it's intuitive and
It's a lot.
observational. So yeah, intuitive and observational.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the first place that I learned to adjust myself was probably at school. And that was like very, probably like kindergarten or first grade or something like that. I remember, I remember one year, I believe I was in the first grade, and I had a substitute teacher who actually happened to be our cousin Linda. And I actually got in trouble because I was very talkative in the class on that particular day. I don't remember if I was talkative at all times before then or not, but I learned that there, as you mentioned, there are certain rules and expectations, and one of them is not being particularly talkative in school or in class. So, and I mean, that's just like a very base example, but
So I don't think that I answered the question properly
you did.
because you said when did you learn or where did you learn to adjust? So when I heard you say adjust this time, I'm thinking in terms of adjusting myself in a way that I don't have to mask myself anymore,
Okay.
as opposed to masking before. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
It does, but you answered the question well. I mean, it's open
Okay.
to interpretation. You answered it.
Yeah. So I was thinking in terms of not masking anymore,
Hmm.
adjusting myself to not mask anymore versus when I first started doing it. And it probably would have been in school as well
Okay.
because I didn't feel like I fit in. I was very shy and I've always felt judged, even as a child. I always felt judged and whatever. So it's probably where it started for most of us if we would think about it, if we would think long and hard about it.
Mm.
I would think that at some point it would have been in our early years. But yeah,
So I mentioned earlier when I was talking about feeling the need sometimes to feel hidden. So I'm going to ask you guys, like, what feelings come up when you consider being fully seen or known?
what I just said, judgment. You think about, and I'm being completely transparent, I have not always made the best choices, the best decisions in my life. And I feel like, and I know it's ridiculous, I feel like when I walk into a room, all eyes are on me and not in a good way. Like, like everyone can see every decision I've ever made
Mm.
and I'm being judged.
Wow. That must
Yeah,
be really hard.
that is extremely difficult. Extremely difficult. I'm better at entering spaces, but that's always how I felt. Like I just wore my past openly. That's how I felt.
And you said felt, so you don't feel that way anymore.
I'm better. I'm better. I would get sick at the thought of entering into a space where I didn't know people. And to be quite honest, even walking into spaces where I knew people, even with family. Yeah, even with my brothers. For some reason with the men in the in my family, with my brothers.
Wow.
I still feel that way today.
Wow. That might be worth exploring.
Yeah, I still feel that way today with my brothers.
Hmm.
Not my sisters, but my brothers.
Hmm.
hmm
That's interesting.
And that may have something to do with being accepted by men. We may have to dig into that. I don't know.
You said you are better now. Like, is there a thing that you did to work on it?
I think just growing and being in the word, and when I look at other people's lives, and I know that I hear people say I may have done what they said I've done, but I'm not who they say I am.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Just those type of encouragements and confirmations and just, repeating these things to myself and people can't judge the decisions that I've made if they didn't walk in my shoes. They don't understand it. My walk was my walk, so it's a process. It's an everyday process.
I've
Mhm.
similarly felt uncomfortable, and I still sometimes do feel uncomfortable walking into a space where I don't really know anybody or I barely know people. Not so much people that I know, but and then I don't fear judgment or think that they're judging me for decisions that I've made. I feel like they're looking at me and judging me for who I am now or for what I'm walking and looking like or sounding like or acting like or whatever. But I say to myself, "Girl, you're not that special. Not that nobody." People are
Mm,
more concerned about their own life or their own presentation than
mhm,
you. So
mhm.
get over yourself. That's not your situation. I mean, I'm saying, not saying that for your situation. I'm saying that's how I
No,
have to
but it,
remind
but it, hit-
myself.
but it hit me though. But it hit me though. hmm Because I feel like, and trying to stay on topic, I feel like with family, I've disappointed so many people. I feel like I disappointed so many people. So it's hard to be in spaces with them because I feel like if I'm still thinking about how I disappointed them, they're still
Mhm.
thinking about it also.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mm. Wow. I would love to say that we are our own harshest critics, though I know sometimes we are not. I want to be able to say, oh, people really aren't judging you. People aren't really disappointed. People don't remember that stuff. And I know that's not always true.
It's not always true. But
And you know who one of my biggest cheerleaders are as far as men are concerned?
who?
Your dad.
Aw.
Your dad. He doesn't say much, but when he does say something to me, I'm kind of like, wow, I didn't know you felt like that.
He's
So
right.
Yeah,
he's
he's
a
at it.
keeper.
Aw. Kind of piggybacking off of that, I guess. Have you ever felt misunderstood or rejected when you were being authentic?
What? I'm just gonna say absolutely and leave it at that. Abso-friggin-lutely.
You keep bringing up these topics that make me think of different poems. But there's this one from Audre Lorde that I use a lot lately, where she's talking about silence. And part of it is that your silence will not protect you. But one of the things that she says is, I'm afraid to be misunderstood when I speak, but then I'm afraid to not speak. So I may as well just speak. So I think, sure, I try to be as clear as I can because I don't want to be misunderstood. And also, I don't have control over whether or not people understand me or how they receive me. And so I may as well just do what I need to do.
Mhm. Have I ever felt that way? Absolutely, but I can't control how other people I can't control other people's thoughts or actions. I can just control how I react to those things. So, whatever.
I love your attitude about that. Mine is slightly different. Yeah.
So we all have played different roles or have different roles in, our circles. How do your roles, whether it be friend, parent, employer, believer, child, sister, or whatever, how does that shape the version of you that shows up?
How about you go first, Tara?
Well, I'm typically, I think, a more laid back person. Sometimes I'm lazy about my words. Sometimes I am, sometimes I can be very blunt. Sometimes I can be very blunt. That
No, really?
but when I am around certain people, depending on the situation, I try to hone that in a bit because not everybody understands it, that I'm being honest, I guess, and not mean-spirited or not being overly I'm not being pessimistic, I'm just being a realist, but I understand that certain people don't understand it, they don't get that. I also, I guess, when I'm showing up as a parent in other spaces, I try to be a little bit more, mm, not stodgy necessarily, but I don't know. I don't know. When I'm with my son, I feel like I can be myself. And as a parent, I say all kinds of stuff. We talk about all kinds of things. And this has always been the case when he was very
Mhm.
little.
Mhm.
But sometimes I feel like other people have different expectations of how a parent should relate to their child
Mhm.
and the things that they
Absolutely.
should say to them or how they should
Mhm.
act with them. And so
Mhm.
a lot of times, in the past, before he became an adult and it became more acceptable for me to be me,
Mhm.
um, I would, I would, I guess, try to fit into more of a parenting mold or
Mhm.
what I thought that looked like.
Mhm. So where are the places that you feel able to be most yourself? Both of you.
People don't believe this, but I'm very shy. And when I'm somewhere, I come to do what I come to do and go. So it's not a whole lot of interaction, if that makes sense. It takes a minute for me to get completely comfortable with anybody. I always have this shell that is kind of hard to break. You're gonna get a little bit of me, but for me to completely remove that mask, it's gonna take some time.
Mhm.
Of course, around my children, I don't have a mask around my children and my sisters. We already talked about my brothers. I'm guarded around my brothers. I feel like I feel like a stepsister around my brothers. Like I'm so guarded and so like fearful of something, fearful of stepping the wrong way or saying the wrong thing or I'm going to get scolded but I am just most comfortable around my children and my siblings, my sisters.
I wonder if that's because your brothers are so much older than you and you probably saw
That
them as
could
more
be.
as father figures, whereas your sisters are closer in age, except, for
That
one,
could
but
that
that
could
one
be.
you've lived with and been around your entire
Right,
life.
right,
So,
right. That could be. That could be. I think it's a combination of their age, not having been in the house with them where I was in the house with my sisters, and then it's that male child relationship that I struggle with. So there's a lot of factors.
mhm,
Yeah. And then as far as how I show up as a parent, it's interesting because there's 18 years between my last two. So relationship in general is just different.
mhm.
I'm not the same with the older two that I am with the younger one. And of course, the things that I talk about with them are quite different from what Jordan and I would talk about. He would turn red yeah, yeah. It's different. It's very different. Yeah, we have to put a cap on what we can talk about, Jordan and I, because he's not ready.
Mhm.
And I know he's not. He's my quiet child. But yeah, if that all makes sense.
It does. And Kim, don't think we didn't know, or I didn't notice that you skipped the last question. How does your role as a friend, whatever, shape the version of you that shows up? Friend, I laid out a bunch of relationships, but you can pick whatever you want.
I mean, I guess I think about my function in a relationship. My function in a relationship, so that might be the shift. So what's my function in my friend group? What's my function in my family group or family system? What's my function at work? So I guess that's the way that it shifts, whatever that like primary function is in that relationship. In my friend group, I try to be a good listener. In my family group, what is my function in my family group? I don't know.
I guess it depends on how you think of it. Like the function you have may not be the one that you actually realize.
Yeah. I mean, I think my function everywhere in all of my relationships, though, is to be a good listener. No, no, that's not entirely true. Sometimes I think of my function as to listen. Sometimes I think of my function as to entertain.
You are definitely an entertainer.
So right, I just like spent a whole week with the babies, and I just got to play with my nieces and nephews.
The final question I actually have is, what would it look like to live with less performance and more presence? Like Kim, you said you're always like pretty much the same.
Well, it's not that I'm always pretty much the same, but it is. So I think that a lot of what my job is, as a minister and a pastor, is to help people be able to be and bring their whole, full, authentic selves to whatever they do in life. And so for me, to be able to help people bring their full authentic selves to their lives. And I need to be able to be my full authentic self. And so I really do intentional work on being and bringing my full self wherever I am. I meditate, I pray, I journal and reflect. So it's not like a natural thing, right? I don't think that people are just all naturally and authentically ourselves. But I do really work and practice at being authentically myself in all areas of my life because I want to help other people be able to do that as well.
For myself, I know in my relationships, I do show up differently. When I'm with my biological family group, like the close biological family group, and John, I am very, very real. I can be loud, I can be crazy, I can be quiet, I can be, however I'm feeling in that moment. I can speak
Mhm.
freely, I can speak openly. And I know that sometimes people like misunderstand what I say. Sometimes I might hurt feelings, although that is not ever my intention, but I'm authentic, I'm honest. However, there are certain relationships where for the longest time I was very careful about what I say because I don't want to hurt feelings. And I know having grown up being told, not necessarily that my mouth was reckless, but kinda, kinda, I would
No, they
always
didn't.
get,
They didn't. They didn't see the face that went along with you saying, "What kinda."
yeah, I grew up getting in trouble about because of my mouth. So as I matured and got into other relationships outside of my home, I tried to let that guide how I interacted with people. So tried to be a lot kinder and necessarily and do a lot of tongue biting. However, I was still mostly me. I just kind of edited how what I said and how I said things. However, after a certain point, after I reach a certain age, I'm like, this, no, I'm just gonna be me. And so sometimes I have conversations with people, or I may make comments or say something that could sound a little harsh. Well, you know who my dad is, so it could sound a little harsh, although I don't mean any harm. Um,
Dad, your mom, both your grandmas. I mean,
I don't mean any harm, but I'm gonna be real with you because I want you to be real with me. And so sometimes that can cause a little bit of conflict. But or people say, "Oh, you weren't always like that, or you changed a little." I'm like, I didn't really change. I'm just showing you a more authentic side of myself. So that kind of thing. But yeah. So
yeah.
what does it like for me to live with less performance and more presence? It's a lot more freeing, and it's definitely a lot more freeing, and I guess sometimes with that, I have to it leaves me feeling a little bit of guilt, but honesty should never bring guilt. So maybe I'm not feeling guilty about the honesty, but maybe sometimes about well, not even about my delivery, because I still think I try to deliver things in a kind way. I guess maybe disappointment that people don't always receive it in the way that I think that they should.
Mm.
I too uh have been accused of being a little flip with my mouth growing up, and then I just said whatever it is I wanted to say. I don't know that I agree with that, but that was the accusation.
Mhm,
So whatever. That may be true, but as an adult, I found that I was not able to do it when it was necessary with
mm,
the people that it was necessary for. And I was probably well into my 40s, closer to 50, when I, as my girlfriend says, found my voice and started saying what I need to say. And it still came, I tried to say it as nicely as possible and chose my words very carefully, but it was still received in the most negative and the most harsh way possible.
mm,
And it didn't always end well. And it made me feel bad. But now it is what it is. It is what it is. Because if I'm pushed to the point where I have to say these things, it's taken me a while, it's well thought out, and it's necessary. It's necessary. It's necessary for me to move forward. So I have to say it.
yeah,
I have to say it. And I'm thinking of two relationships in particular where I feel like one has gotten better, and I like to think it's because I communicated with them about an incident, It didn't go well in the beginning, but I think overall we're in a better space. And then I think of another situation where I spoke up about how I was being treated and how I felt about it, and now this person doesn't speak to me. So as long as I'm letting you do whatever you want to me and say whatever you want to me in any tone, and I don't say anything, then we're okay. But the minute I speak up, then we're not good.
Mhm.
Then I have to be okay with that. I have
Yeah.
to be okay with that. So if I can't show up in a space with you where I can be myself and express myself, then we don't need to be in the same space. We don't need to be in the same space.
Yeah. There's a little test that I've heard around, like, when you're speaking, like, is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind?
Is it kind? Yep.
And I also like helpful, because I mean necessary I don't always know. But if when I add helpful, I think, well, how can I how can I frame this in a way that is actually helpful to me and the other person and the situation
Hmm.
involved? I mean, because you say, you tell the truth and it doesn't end well. I'm like, maybe not. Maybe it doesn't end the way we would like it to end, but it probably ended well in the way we
That
would want to
part
have
is true
ended.
too. That is very true. Yeah, well doesn't necessarily mean as planned.
Mhm.
So there you have it, people.
Mhm.
In the words of our friend, our other friend Kim, there you have it, America. But so let's remove the mask.
Can I read you? I know you're gonna share some scripture, but can I read you a poem? So when you ask about how it feels
Mhm.
when you can be your full self,
Mhm.
it reminds me of this poem that again I sometimes use by an eco-feminist Starhawk. She writes, "We are all longing to go home to some place we have never been, a place half remembered and half envisioned. We can only catch glimpses of it from time to time. Community. Somewhere, there are people to whom we can speak with passion without having the words catch in our throats. Somewhere, a circle of hands will open to receive us. Eyes will light up as we enter. Voices will celebrate with us whenever we come into our own power. Community means strength that joins our strength to do the work that needs to be done. Arms to hold us when we falter. A circle of healing, a circle of friends, someplace where we can be free."
That's beautiful.
Be beautiful.
Yeah.
That's
Hmm.
beautiful. And who was the author?
Starhawk.
Star.
Thank you for sharing.
I mean, I just love that where my voice won't catch in my throat, where eyes light up when I walk into the room.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And Tara, I know that you have scripture for us.
Well, actually, this week,
You don't have a scripture?
for shame, of course I do. So,
Okay. Oh no.
so the scripture I have is from Galatians. It's chapter 1, verse 10, and it says, "For am I now seeking the approval of man or of God? Or am I trying to please man? If I were still trying to please man, I would not be a servant of Christ." And this verse reminds me of how easy it is to get caught up in what people think. And sometimes we have to adjust ourselves, or sometimes we do adjust ourselves up without even realizing it because we're trying to be liked, we're trying to be accepted, or sometimes we do it just to avoid conflict, which is, what I just spoke about. But I think that that pull for approval, it does absolutely shape how we show up. And sometimes if we do it enough, it kind of shapes the person that we are, because sometimes we forget that it's not truly who we are. So I think that the words in here were clear.
Mhm.
If our focus is on pleasing people, then we lose sight of who we're really following. And I don't think that God wants us or needs us to be a polished version of ourselves. He already knows who we are. He already sees who we are, and that's who he wants. For myself, realizing that, accepting that, living that is where peace starts, and basically stop performing and just start being.
I like that. Just start being.
So the truth is, we can't keep wearing masks and expect to be connected when we edit ourselves, we filter ourselves, we hide ourselves. the version that people are seeing, the version that people are responding to isn't really us. It's not really who we are. And that disconnect, it adds up. Yeah, so guys, thanks for spending time with us today. If this conversation stirred something in you, you're not alone. And if someone came to mind while you were listening, go ahead and pass this along to them because sometimes the right words hit at the right time. Also, don't forget a new episode drops every other Thursday. Make sure to follow, rate, and share so that more people can join the conversation.
Find us on the socials at Unfiltered Perspectives and Unfiltered Perspectives IG for Instagram. Tell us how you're letting your mask crack a little bit this week.
We thank you for joining us, and we encourage everyone this week to remove the mask. Have an awesome week, and we will see you back here in 2. Bye-bye.